Is that you, Mrs. Martha? The voice of Robert came out in a hoarse, broken whisper, while his face paled until it turned almost greyish. His hands gripped the doorframe as if he needed to hold on to keep from collapsing. Behind him, I heard the choked cry of my daughter, Elizabeth. "Mom, you saved us!" My daughter ran toward me with arms outstretched, her messy hair falling over her tear-stained face. But I took a step back, a small but firm step. I raised a hand between us, stopping her in her tracks. Then I smiled. It was a cold, sad smile, filled with a power I had never felt before. "I didn't come to save you," I said in a calm voice. "I came to take back what is mine." I held up the apartment keys so they could see them clearly. The same keys to apartment 4B. The same apartment where, exactly 2 years ago, they had left me on the street with 3 suitcases and a broken heart. "I bought this apartment at the judicial foreclosure sale 3 days ago," I continued, watching the colour disappear from Elizabeth's face too. "I paid $58,000. Money I had saved during these 2 years. But let me tell you how I got here," I added, "because this story doesn't start today. It starts much earlier, on that terrible day that changed my life forever." My hands were trembling now as I held those keys in front of them. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every beat reminded me of all the pain, all the humiliation, and the entire journey I had taken to reach this moment. I had climbed those stairs barely 5 minutes ago with a firm stride, but my legs were shaking. The building was still the same, with that worn beige paint on the walls and the smell of dampness rising from the basement. Each step brought me closer to the moment I had imagined hundreds of times during these 2 years. In the sleepless nights, in my tiny rented room, I used to wonder what I would feel if I ever saw Elizabeth and Robert again. I imagined myself yelling everything I could never say. I imagined myself crying, or simply turning my back on them without a word. But now that the moment had arrived, I discovered something surprising inside me. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel the burning desire for vengeance that I had nurtured during the first few months. What I felt was something much deeper and colder. I felt the quiet weight of justice. I felt the absolute certainty that I had done the right thing by getting up, by rebuilding myself, by not staying and waiting for their repentance. When I reached the door of 4B, I stopped. I could hear voices inside. Elizabeth's sharp voice sounded agitated, almost hysterical. Robert's deep voice was trying to calm her but sounded strained, worried. They were arguing about money, about the bank, about the eviction notice. They didn't know who had bought the apartment at the auction. They had no idea that their salvation or their downfall was on the other side of that door. I took a deep breath. I adjusted my cream-colored blouse, the one I had bought especially for this occasion. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed vengeance or triumph. Just an elegant, discreet blouse that said without words that I had taken care of myself, that I had learned to value myself again. I rang the doorbell. The familiar sound echoed inside the apartment, and the voices abruptly stopped. I heard hurried footsteps. I heard Robert say something in a low voice. I heard the sound of the security chain being removed. And then the door opened. Robert appeared in the doorway with disheveled hair, in a t-shirt and pajama bottoms at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. His tired eyes looked at me without recognizing me at first. Then I saw them widen. I saw his mouth open slightly. I saw all the color drain from his face. His lips moved, but no sound came out for several eternal seconds. And then came that moment I will never forget. "Is that you, Mrs. Martha?" Behind him, I heard Elizabeth impatiently ask who it was. When Robert didn't answer, she too appeared at the door. "My daughter, my only daughter," the girl I had carried in my womb, who I had raised alone after her father died, who had been my reason for living for so many years. Now she had unwashed hair, pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face showed deep, dark circles. She was wearing old, stained clothes. When she saw me, she let out a choked cry and brought both hands to her mouth. "Mom, you saved us. I knew you would come. I knew you wouldn't abandon us." And then, without any shame, without any glimmer of awareness of the terrible irony of the situation, she ran toward me with her arms outstretched. But I took a step back. That simple gesture stopped her in her tracks. The desperate smile on her face began to fade as she really looked at me. As she saw my calm expression, my dry eyes, my upright posture. As she noticed the folder under my arm and the keys in my hand. "Good afternoon, Elizabeth. Robert." My voice came out firmer than I expected. Colder, too. "I suppose you received the bank's notification about the sale of the property." I watched them exchange confused glances. I watched Robert frown, trying to process what was happening. I watched Elizabeth look at the keys in my hand with a mixture of hope and growing fear. "Yes, we received it," Robert said slowly, cautiously. "They gave us 30 days to vacate. The bank sold the apartment in foreclosure because of our debts. But Mum, listen, we need to talk to the new owner. We need to ask for more time. We need to explain our situation." Then I smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but also filled with a power I had never felt before. "You don't need to look far. The new owner is standing in front of you." I held up the keys so they could see them clearly. "I bought this apartment 3 days ago. I paid $58,000 in the judicial foreclosure sale. Money I saved during these 2 years, working as an event decorator, making floral arrangements, sewing tablecloths for parties. Money I scraped together living in a 10-foot by 13-foot room, eating rice and eggs most days, walking in the rain to save the bus fare. The silence that followed was so dense I could almost touch it. Robert had gone completely still. Elizabeth had started shaking her head, slowly at first, then faster. "No, no, 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 Mom. No. You came to help us, right? You bought the apartment to save us, so we wouldn't be thrown out onto the street, right, Mum? Please tell me yes." Tears began to stream down her cheeks. "Mum, I am so sorry. I'm sorry for everything that happened. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. I'm sorry I let Robert. I'm so sorry." But I was no longer listening to her apologies. My eyes had drifted toward the inside of the apartment, toward the living room I could see from the threshold. And what I saw instantly transported me 2 years back, to that terrible day that had marked the lowest point of my life. The day my daughter had betrayed me in the cruelest way I could have imagined. 2 years ago, this very apartment was my home. I had lived there for 15 years, since I was widowed. Elizabeth had insisted so much that I move in with her. "Mum, you can't stay alone in that big house. Come live with us. Sarah needs you. I need you." And I, who had just lost the love of my life, who felt so lost and so alone, accepted without a second thought. At first, everything was wonderful. I helped take care of Sarah, who was barely 7 years old then. I cooked, I cleaned, I felt useful again. Robert worked for a sales company and earned well, but it wasn't enough for all the expenses, so I contributed. I paid half the groceries every month. I paid the electricity and water bills. With my widow's pension, which was modest but decent, I helped in every way I could. Elizabeth worked part-time as a secretary, and I was in charge of picking Sarah up from school. I helped her with her homework. I read her stories before bedtime. I was happy being a grandmother, being a mother again, feeling part of a family. But over the years, something started to change. Robert began to treat me differently, small comments at first. "Mrs. Martha, could you eat in your room today? We have important guests." Or would it be better if you didn't come out in your robe in the mornings? Don't you think? What will the neighbors think? I swallowed the humiliation because I didn't want to cause problems, because I thought they were just quirks of his that would pass, because I loved my daughter and my granddaughter more than my own pride. Then, 3 years ago, Robert received a major promotion at his job. Suddenly he started earning double, triple. They began to buy new things, a huge television, elegant furniture, designer clothes. Robert grew a neat beard and started wearing expensive suits. Elizabeth started going to beauty salons and buying handbags that cost more than my entire month's pension. And I became a bother. "Mum, could you not put your clothes out to dry on the balcony?" Elizabeth would ask me with shame in her eyes. "It just looks really bad from the street." "Mum, when Robert's friends and his wife come over, please just stay in your room, okay? They are very special." Special. That word hurt me more than any direct insult. I had stopped being the mother, the grandmother, the family member. I had become the poor old woman who lived on charity in her successful daughter's apartment. One day, I heard Robert talking on the phone with his brother in the living room. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch, and he didn't know I could hear him. "No, brother. We can't go to that restaurant. What am I going to do with the old woman? I can't take her, and I can't leave her alone because then Elizabeth feels guilty. I'm tired of having to plan everything around my mother-in-law. We're not young anymore, you know. We want to live our lives, not take care of the elderly." The elderly. I looked at myself in the reflection of the kitchen window. I was 70 years old, but I looked good for my age. I stayed active. I took care of my appearance. I wasn't a burden at all. But for Robert, I was an old piece of furniture taking up space. That night I talked to Elizabeth. "Daughter, if I'm a problem, I can look for a place to live. I don't want to cause you trouble." I saw the panic in her eyes for a second, but then she hid it with a forced smile. "Mum, don't talk nonsense. This is your house. You're not a problem." But her voice didn't sound convincing, and I knew she was lying. Things got worse when Robert started bringing clients home. Elegant dinners, expensive wines, conversations about business and investments. I was forbidden to leave my room during those meetings, as if I were a disgrace, as if my simple presence could ruin his new image as a successful man. One afternoon, Sarah came to my room crying. She was 19 years old now and was studying in college. "Grandma, I heard Dad talking to Mum. He says you have to leave. He says they can't support you anymore. He says they need the room to make a home office." My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. "And what did your mum say?" Sarah looked down. "She didn't say anything, Grandma. She just stayed quiet." My daughter's silence hurt more than any cruel word Robert could have said. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay looking at the ceiling, thinking about what I had done wrong. I had been a good mother. I had raised Elizabeth alone after her father's death. I had worked 2 jobs to give her an education. I had sacrificed my dreams, my desires, my entire youth for her. And this was what I received in return. A week later, the day that would change my life forever arrived. It was a Friday afternoon. I had gone to the grocery store to buy things for dinner. I was carrying 2 heavy bags in my 70-year-old hands. I climbed the stairs slowly, stopping on each floor to catch my breath. When I opened the apartment door, I found something I never expected to see. My things were packed, 3 old suitcases in the middle of the living room. My clothes hastily folded, my photographs stuffed into plastic bags, my shoes in a cardboard box. Robert was standing next to the suitcases with his arms crossed. Elizabeth was sitting on the couch, looking at the floor, wringing a handkerchief between her hands. "What is this?" My voice came out barely a whisper. "Mrs. Martha, I think it's time to have this conversation with you." Robert spoke with that tone he used to fire employees at his job. Cold, professional, emotionless. "Elizabeth and I have decided that we need our space. You've lived here for many years, and we appreciate it. But now we have other plans for the apartment." The grocery bags fell from my hands. "Elizabeth," I looked at my daughter. "Daughter, look at me." But she didn't look up. Tears ran down her cheeks, but her mouth remained closed. "Elizabeth, please, tell me this isn't happening." Robert stepped forward. "Look, Mrs. Martha, we don't want to make this any harder than necessary. We've taken out some cash for you, $500. It's enough for you to find a room somewhere. Elizabeth has a friend who knows an affordable boarding house near downtown." $500. 15 years of help, of love, of dedication were worth $500. "You can't do this." My voice began to tremble. "This is my home. I've paid bills here. I've taken care of this family. And we appreciate it," Robert said, with that false smile I hated so much. "But legally, this apartment is in our name. You have no rights to it. So please, take your things and leave without making a scene." I turned to Elizabeth again. "Daughter, look me in the eye and tell me this is what you want." Finally, she looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her lower lip was trembling. "I'm sorry, Mum," she whispered. "But Robert is right. We need the space. You'll be fine. You've always been strong." I felt as if I had been emptied out inside. "Where is Sarah?" I asked. "She's on a school trip," Robert replied quickly. "She'll be back in 2 weeks. We thought it would be better to do this while she's gone. You know how sentimental she is." Cowardly. They waited until my granddaughter was gone so they could kick me out without witnesses. "Please," my voice broke. "Please, don't do this to me. I have nowhere to go. I have no one else." Robert looked at his watch impatiently. "Mrs. Martha, it's already 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We need you to leave now. We have an important dinner tonight, and we need to prepare the apartment." An important dinner? I was being expelled from my home so they could have an important dinner. I looked at Elizabeth one last time. I searched her eyes for some trace of the girl she used to be. The girl who hugged me when she had nightmares. The girl who told me I was the best mum in the world. The girl who promised she would always take care of me when I was old. But that girl no longer existed. "It's all right," I said finally. My voice sounded hollow, empty. "I'll leave." I took the first suitcase. It weighed so much that I almost fell. Robert didn't move to help me. Elizabeth was still sitting on the couch, crying silently, but doing nothing to stop this. I dragged the first suitcase to the door. Then I went back for the second. And then the third. 3 suitcases with my entire life inside. When I was in the hallway with my things, I turned around one last time. "Elizabeth, I just want you to know something. When your father died, I could have given up. I could have let the government take you to an orphanage while I worked. But I didn't. I worked 2 jobs. I slept 4 hours a night. I ate once a day, for you could eat 3 times. Everything I did, every sacrifice I made, was for you." Elizabeth sobbed harder but said nothing. "I hope that when you are old, your daughter treats you better than you are treating me today." Robert started to close the door. "Goodbye, Mrs. Martha. We wish you the best." And the door closed. I stood there in the hallway, looking at that closed door. I could hear Elizabeth crying on the other side. I could hear Robert telling her to calm down. that it had been necessary, that everything would be fine. Slowly, I went down the stairs, dragging my suitcases one by one. Each step was torture. My knees ached. My back ached. But nothing hurt as much as my heart. When I reached the building entrance, I simply sat down on the sidewalk. I had nowhere to go. I had no one to call. I stayed there, sitting with my 3 suitcases, watching people pass by. Everyone was in a hurry. Everyone was going somewhere. No one looked at me. To them, I was just another poor old woman sitting on the street. It started to get dark. It was cold. It was March, and the wind was blowing hard. I wrapped myself in my thin sweater, but it wasn't enough. I started to shiver. I thought about calling an old friend, but I realized that during those 15 years living with Elizabeth, I had lost touch with almost all of them. Robert always complained when I went out. "Where are you going, Mrs. Martha? Shouldn't you stay here taking care of Sarah?" Little by little, I had stopped accepting invitations. I had stopped calling. I had completely isolated myself. Now I was completely alone. I cried. I cried there, sitting on that cold sidewalk as the night fell over me. I cried for all the lost years. I cried for the daughter I had loved more than my own life. I cried for the grandmother who would no longer have the privilege of seeing her granddaughter grow up. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I looked up. A woman about 60 years old was looking at me with concern. She was carrying grocery bags. I'm fine," I lied. She looked at my suitcases, my face swollen from crying so much, my defeated posture. "No, you are not all right. Do you have somewhere to sleep tonight?" I shook my head. The woman sighed deeply and then extended her hand to me. "Come with me. I can't leave you here on the street. My name is Mildred. I live 2 blocks from here." "I can't accept. I don't know you. I don't want to be a bother." "Nonsense. No one deserves to sleep on the street. Come on. My apartment is small, but I have a sofa where you can rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll see what we can do." I didn't have the strength to argue. I took my lightest suitcase and followed Mildred. She, despite her own bags, insisted on helping me with another suitcase. Mildred's apartment was tiny, a living room that also served as a dining area, a small kitchenette, a bathroom, and a small bedroom. But it was clean and warm, and she welcomed me with a kindness I hadn't experienced in years. "Sit down. I'm going to make you some hot tea." I sat on the sofa and simply let myself fall. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally shattered. Mildred returned with 2 steaming cups of tea and sat across from me. "Do you want to talk about it?" And then I told her everything. I told her about Elizabeth, about Robert, about the 15 years living with them, about how they had thrown me out as if I were trash. Mildred listened in silence, shaking her head sadly. "My son did something similar 5 years ago," she finally said. "His wife never liked me. When they had their second baby, they decided they needed my room. They gave me 2 weeks to find another place. Since then, I've been living here alone. My son visits me once a year at Christmas, if he remembers." There was so much pain in her eyes that I immediately recognized. It was the same pain I felt. "How did you get over it?" I asked. "I don't know if I got over it," she admitted, "but I learned to live with it. I learned that we can't force people to love us, even if they are our own blood. I learned that sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we were born into." That night I slept on Mildred's sofa. It was the first of many nights in which I cried silently, looking at the ceiling, wondering how my life had come to this point. The next morning, Mildred made me breakfast. "You can stay here for 1 week," she told me, "but after that, You'll have to look for something more permanent. I can barely cover my own expenses, and this place is too small for two people. I understand, and thank you. I don't know how to repay you for your kindness. You don't owe me anything. Just promise me that when you're better, you'll help someone else who needs it. That's how kindness works. You pay it forward, not backward. During that week, I looked for rooms to rent. With my widow's pension of $650 a month, my options were very limited. Most decent places cost more than I could afford. The ones that were within my budget were awful. Rooms without windows, with damp on the walls, in dangerous neighborhoods. I finally found a room in a shared house. It cost $250 a month, plus utilities. It was tiny, barely fitting a twin bed and a small closet. I shared a bathroom with 3 other people. The kitchen was communal, and I had to put my name on everything I bought so it wouldn't be stolen. But it was a roof over my head. I moved there with my 3 suitcases and started the hardest part, rebuilding my life from scratch. The first months were the toughest. I woke up every morning feeling a terrible emptiness in my chest. I missed Sarah with a physical ache. I missed cooking for my family. I missed feeling useful and needed. But most of all, I missed the daughter I thought I had. The daughter who, in reality, never existed. I spent the first few weeks in that tiny room practically without leaving. I stayed lying on that narrow bed, looking at the cracks in the ceiling, wondering if it was worth continuing. I was 70 years old. Why rebuild a life at this age? For whom? Mildred would come to visit me every 2 or 3 days. She would knock on the door and enter with a food container of homemade food. "Martha, you have to eat. You have to go out. You can't stay locked up here waiting to die." "And what's the point of going out?" I answered her. "I have nowhere to go. I have no one. You have yourself, and that has to be enough." But I didn't feel enough. I felt empty, useless, discarded. One day, Mildred arrived with some news. Martha, a friend of mine, organizes events, weddings, birthdays, baptisms. She needs someone to help her with the floral decorations. She doesn't pay much, but it's something. Are you interested? "I don't know anything about floral decoration," I replied without enthusiasm. "But you know how to sew, right? She told me that before. You used to make curtains and tablecloths." It was true. Before I got married, I had worked in a small tailoring shop. Later, when Elizabeth was little, I sewed clothes for her and for the neighborhood children to earn extra money. But I had stopped doing it more than 15 years ago. "That was a long time ago, Mildred. Hands don't forget. Come with me tomorrow. Just meet my friend. If you don't like it, you don't have to accept." The next day, Mildred practically dragged me out of my room. She took me to a small office downtown, where I met Patricia, an energetic woman in her 50s, who talked very fast and constantly gesticulated with her hands. "So you are the woman Mildred recommended to me. Look, I need tablecloths for a wedding this Saturday. 50 placemats, nothing complicated, just basic hemming. Can you do them in 4 days?" I don't know if I can. "I'll pay you $150 for the complete job. I already have the fabric. I just need the labor." $150. It was almost 1/4 of my monthly pension for only 4 days of work. "I'll do it," I said, before I could regret it. Patricia smiled widely. "Perfect. Come, I'll show you the storage room where you have the fabric and the sewing machine you can use." Those 4 days I sewed as I hadn't in decades. My fingers hurt. My back ached from being hunched over the machine. But there was something healing about the process. Something meditative. Each stitch was a thought I let go of. Each finished placemat was a small achievement. When I delivered the 50 placemats, Patricia inspected them carefully. They are perfect. Better than I expected. Will you be available for more work? And so began my return to life. Patricia called me every week with new projects, tablecloths, napkins, chair covers. The work was irregular and the pay was modest, but it was mine. It was something I did with my own hands, with my own effort. Little by little, I started leaving my room more often. I would go buy fabrics. I would visit Mildred. I would walk in the nearby park in the afternoons. And slowly, very slowly, the emptiness in my chest began to fill with something else. It wasn't happiness yet, but it wasn't that devastating pain either. It was something in between. It was survival. 3 months after starting to work for Patricia, she made me a proposal. Martha, I'm getting more and more requests for floral arrangements, in addition to the table linens. I don't know anything about flowers. Would you be interested in learning? I know someone who gives a basic floral arrangement course. It lasts 2 weeks. If you pay half, I'll pay the other half. And then we can work together at the events. Why would you do that for me? I asked, suspicious. I no longer believed in selfless kindness. Because it's good business, Patricia answered honestly. If you learn, I can offer more services. We both win. It's that simple. I accepted. The floral arrangement course was revealing. I discovered that I had a talent for it. Something about the combination of colors in the way of balancing the flowers came naturally to me. The instructor, a Japanese woman named Keiko, constantly congratulated me. You have a very good eye, Mrs. Martha. Very good sense of balance. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. After the course, I started doing floral arrangements for Patricia's events. At first, they were simple things. Basic centerpieces, small bouquets. But with each event, I improved. I experimented. I dared to do more elaborate things. One day a client saw me working on the decorations for her birthday party. Who made these arrangements? They are beautiful. I made them, ma'am, I replied timidly. Do you have business cards? I would like to hire you directly for my daughter's wedding. I didn't have cards. I didn't have my own business. I only worked for Patricia. But that question planted a seed in my mind. Why couldn't I have my own small business? That night I talked to Mildred about the idea. It's risky, she admitted. But you have talent, Martha, and you already have some clients who know you. Why not try? Because I'm 70 years old. Because I don't know anything about business. Because I don't have money to invest. You are 70 years old, you are not dead, and you don't need a large investment to start. You just need to register as a freelance worker and make some simple cards. The rest comes with time. Mildred helped me with the paperwork. We went together to the business registration office. I paid the $50 for the basic license. I designed my own cards on a computer at an internet cafe and had them printed. 500 cards for $20. Martha Dineas, floral event decor. When I held those cards in my hands, something changed inside me. I was no longer just the old woman who had been kicked out by her daughter. I was a businesswoman. I was someone with purpose. I spoke with Patricia honestly. I want to start working on my own, but I don't want you to think I'm ungrateful. You gave me an opportunity when I needed it most. Patricia laughed. Martha, I knew this would happen eventually. You have too much talent to work only for me. Let's make a deal. I will continue to call you for big jobs where I need extra help. And if I have a client who only wants flowers, I'll refer them to you. Deal. The first months with my own business were difficult. Some months I earned barely $100 extra besides my pension. Other months I earned $300 or $400. But every dollar I earned was a victory. I started saving obsessively. I ate the cheapest food possible. Rice, eggs, beans, potatoes. I only bought clothes at thrift stores. I walked instead of taking the bus whenever I could. Every dollar I saved went straight into a cookie jar I hid under my bed. 6 months after starting my business, I counted the money in the jar. I had $1,200 saved. It was the first time in my life that I had my own savings. Money that no one could take from me. Money I had earned with my own effort. I cried that night. But this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pride. 1 year after Elizabeth kicked me out, I received a call. It was Sarah. "Grandma? Grandma, is that you?" My heart almost stopped when I heard her voice. "Sarah, my dear, how did you get my number?" "I asked Aunt Mildred to give it to me." "Grandma, why did you leave? Why didn't you tell me anything? Mum says you decided to go live alone, but I don't believe her. I know something happened." And then I told her the truth. I told her everything. How her parents had kicked me out. How I had slept on the street that first night. How I had had to rebuild my life from scratch. Sarah cried on the other end of the line. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. If I had been here, I wouldn't have let that happen. Can I come visit you?" "Of course, my love. You're always welcome." Sarah came to visit me the next day. When she saw my tiny room, her eyes filled with tears. "Grandma, this is terrible. How can you live here?" "It's what I can afford, honey. But I'm all right, really." We spent the whole afternoon talking. Sarah told me that she had fought with her parents when she found out the truth, that she had stopped talking to them for weeks, that she had moved to a student dorm so as not to live with them. "Grandma, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to help you. I'm going to get you out of this place." "No, Sarah. You have to focus on your studies." "I'm fine. Really, look." I showed her my business cards. I told her about my floral decoration business. I showed her photos of some events I had decorated. "Grandma, this is incredible. You did all this." The pride in her voice filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Sarah started visiting me regularly. Every 2 weeks she would come to my room and we would spend hours talking. She told me about her classes, her friends, her dreams. I told her about my clients, my projects, my small achievements. She became my connection to hope. My reminder that not everything was lost, that there was still love in my life, even if it came from where I least expected it. "And Mum," I asked one day, "how is she?" Sarah sighed. "Not very well, Grandma. Dad lost his job 3 months ago. The company made massive cutbacks, and he was one of those laid off. Mum had to go back to work full-time, but she doesn't earn enough. They're behind on the apartment payment. The bank is sending them warning letters." I felt a pang in my chest. It wasn't satisfaction at their suffering. It was something more complex. It was the realization that life has its own way of enacting justice. "Mum asks about you all the time," Sarah continued. "She cries a lot. She says she made the worst mistake of her life." "And what do you tell her?" I tell her she's right, that she made the worst mistake of her life, and that now she has to live with the consequences. My granddaughter had grown so much. She was no longer the naive teenager I remembered. She had become a woman with principles, with a backbone. "Sarah, listen to me carefully. I don't want you to stop talking to your mother because of me. She's still your mother." "But Grandma..." "No. Listen to me. The mistakes she made with me are between her and me. You have the right to have a relationship with your mother if you want to. Don't let my pain become your burden." Sarah hugged me tightly. How can you be so good after everything they did to you? I'm not good, honey. I'm just tired of carrying hatred in my heart. It weighs too much. But even though I said that to Sarah, the truth was more complicated. There was hatred in me. There was resentment. There were nights when I woke up with my jaw clenched, reliving that day they kicked me out. There were moments when I fantasized about Elizabeth and Robert losing everything, about them suffering as I had suffered. And then I would feel terrible for having those thoughts. Time kept passing. My floral decoration business grew slowly but steadily. I got some regular clients. A company that did corporate events started hiring me monthly. A church asked me to decorate their special celebrations. A year and a half after starting, I was earning between $500 and $700 extra a month in addition to my pension. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to live with some dignity. I moved to a better room, bigger, with its own bathroom, in a safer neighborhood. It cost $400 a month, but it was worth every cent. It had a large window that let in the sun. It had space for a small table where I could work on my floral arrangements. For the first time in almost 2 years, I felt like a human being again, not just a survivor. I met Marcus during this time. He was an attorney in his late 50s who had hired my services to decorate his daughter's graduation party. He arrived early at the venue and found me working. "Are you the decorator?" "Yes, sir. Martha Dines." "Marcus Castle, nice to meet you. Look, I have a question. Is your business formally registered? Do you have all your papers in order?" My heart skipped a beat. Had I done something wrong? "I have my freelance worker license. Is there a problem?" "No, no problem. It's just that I specialize my practice in helping small business owners. I like to make sure that people who are starting up do it the right way from the beginning. It avoids a lot of headaches later." "I can't afford an attorney, sir. I'm not offering you my paid services. I'm offering you a free 30-minute consultation. If you want to hire me after that, fine. If not, at least you'll know you're doing things correctly." I accepted the consultation out of curiosity more than anything else. Marcus reviewed my papers and gave me several useful tips. He explained about taxes, how to protect myself legally, how to formalize contracts with clients. "You have a good business here, Mrs. Martha. With a little more structure, it could grow significantly." "I'm not looking to grow significantly. I'm just looking to live with dignity." Marcus smiled with understanding. "That's the best reason to have a business." Marcus became a kind of mentor to me. He didn't charge me for his advice. He said he liked to help senior entrepreneurs because he felt it was an underserved group. His own mother had started a baking business at 65, so he understood the challenges. With his help, I formalized my business better. I opened a separate bank account for my work income. I started keeping more orderly records. I learned to make appropriate invoices. And I kept saving. Every dollar I could, I saved. No longer in a jar under the bed, but in that bank account. Watching it grow month by month gave me a satisfaction I can't describe. 2 years after Elizabeth kicked me out, I had almost $30,000 saved. $30,000 I had earned with my own work, with my own 72-year-old hands. It was more money than I had ever had in my entire life. One day, Mildred came to visit me with a strange expression on her face. "Martha, I need to tell you something, but I don't know if I should." "What is it?" "I saw an ad in the newspaper. The bank is foreclosing on several apartments due to unpaid debts. One of them is your daughter's apartment. 4B in the Los Jasmines building." My heart started beating faster. "When is the auction?" "Next Friday. The starting price is $55,000. It will probably sell for $60,000 or $65,000. $55,000. I had $30,000 saved. "Mildred, I need to ask you a favor, a very big favor. That same afternoon, I went to see Marcus. I need a loan. I need $30,000 more than I have saved. Marcus looked at me in surprise. Mrs. Martha, that's a lot of money. What do you need it for? I told him about the apartment, about my daughter, about everything that had happened. Marcus was silent for a long moment. I understand why you want to do this, but I have to ask you, are you sure? Is this revenge, or is it justice? I don't know, I admitted honestly. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. I just know I need to close that circle. I need to stand in that apartment as the owner, not as the beggar who pleaded to stay. And if you get the apartment, what will you do? Will you throw them out on the street like they threw you out? I don't know yet, but I need to have that option. I need to have that power. Marcus nodded slowly. I can't lend you $30,000 directly, but I can help you apply for a bank loan. With your established business and your savings as collateral, you have a good chance of getting it approved. Let's work on that. The next few days were a whirlwind. Marcus helped me prepare all the documentation. We went to the bank together. I presented my bank statements, my income history, my projections. On Thursday afternoon, the bank approved the loan, $30,000 at 8% annual interest, payable in 10 years. Now I had $60,000 available. Friday arrived, the day of the auction. Mildred insisted on accompanying me. Marcus also came as my legal representative. The auction took place in a cold, grey courtroom. There were about 20 people there, most of them investors in expensive suits and leather briefcases. I was sitting in the last row, in my best dress, my hands trembling on my purse. Mildred squeezed my hand. Breathe, Martha. Everything is going to be all right. But I wasn't so sure. What was I doing? Was I about to spend all my savings and go into debt for the next 10 years just to get an apartment back? Just to prove a point? The auctioneer started with other properties first. I watched how the process worked. People raised their numbered paddles. Prices went up quickly. Some apartments sold for double the starting price. Finally, it was the turn of apartment 4B. 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, living room, kitchen apartment in the Jasmines building. Starting price, $55,000. Who offers $55,000? A man in a grey suit raised his paddle. $55,000. Anyone offer $56,000? My hand went up by itself, holding the paddle Marcus had given me. $56,000. $57,000. The man in grey raised his paddle again. $57,000. $58,000. I raised my paddle again. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The man in grey looked at me, assessing me, a 72-year-old woman in a simple dress. He probably thought I didn't have much money. He raised his paddle one more time. $58,000. $59,000. I raised my paddle. Marcus had advised me not to show emotion, to keep a neutral face. The man in grey frowned. This time he waited a moment before raising his paddle. $59,000. $60,000. I raised my paddle without hesitation. $60,000. Now I had used up my entire budget. If the man offered more, I would have to withdraw. The man in grey studied me for what seemed like an eternity. Then he looked at his papers, did some mental calculations, and shook his head. He leaned back in his seat without raising the paddle. $60,000 once. $60,000 twice. The hammer fell. Sold for $60,000 to the lady with paddle number 17. Mildred shouted with joy and hugged me. I simply stayed seated, stunned by what I had just done. I had bought the apartment. The apartment where they had humiliated me. The apartment from which they had thrown me out like a dog. Now it was mine. The paperwork took 3 days. Signing papers, transferring funds, registering the property. Marcus took care of everything. When I finally had the keys in my hand, I sat in his office and just looked at them. "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked gently. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a month." "When will you go to the apartment?" "Tomorrow. I want to go tomorrow." "Do you want me to accompany you?" "No. This is something I have to do alone." I couldn't sleep that night. I mentally rehearsed what I would say. How would I react? What would I do when I saw Elizabeth and Robert again? Would I scream? Would I cry? Would I remain silent? I didn't know. The next morning I dressed carefully. The cream-coloured blouse I had bought for the occasion. Dark pants, comfortable but elegant shoes. I put on makeup for the first time in months. I carefully styled my hair. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a different woman from the one I had been 2 years ago. This woman had a straight back. This woman had her own light. This woman didn't need anyone's approval. I took a taxi to the building. I didn't want to arrive sweaty after walking. I wanted to arrive with dignity. The building looked more deteriorated than I remembered. The paint was more peeling. There was new graffiti on the walls of the first floor. But for me, that place was full of ghosts. I climbed the stairs slowly, savoring every step. This time I wasn't carrying heavy suitcases. This time I was carrying keys and documents that gave me all the power. When I reached the door of 4B, I stopped. I could hear voices inside. Elizabeth sounded hysterical. Robert was trying to calm her, but his voice also sounded tense, worried. "I don't understand how we're going to find another place in 30 days. No one is going to rent to us with our credit history. What are we going to do, Robert? Where are we going to go?" "We'll find something. There are always options." "Options? What options? We are ruined. We have no savings. We can barely pay for food. And now we have to move." I rang the doorbell. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. I heard slow footsteps approaching the door. I heard the sound of the peephole opening. A choked cry. Then nothing for several seconds. Finally, the door opened, and there was Robert, with dishevelled hair, in his sleepwear at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, his face paling to ash as his eyes recognized me. "Is that you, Mrs. Martha?" His voice came out broken, incredulous. His legs seemed to give way, and he had to cling to the doorframe. Behind him, Elizabeth appeared, and when she saw me, her reaction was even more dramatic. She brought both hands to her mouth, her eyes widening with a mixture of shock and desperate hope. "Mom!" And then she ran towards me with her arms outstretched. "Mom, you saved us. I knew you would come. I knew you wouldn't abandon us." But I took that step back that stopped her in her tracks. I raised my hand between us, firm but not aggressive. I saw how the hope on her face began to transform into confusion, into growing fear. "Good afternoon, Elizabeth. Robert." My voice sounded colder than I had planned. Stronger, too. "I suppose you received the bank's notification about the sale of the property." I watched them exchange confused glances. I watched Robert frown, his brain slowly working to process what was happening. "Yes, we received it," Robert said cautiously. "They gave us 30 days to vacate. The bank sold the apartment in foreclosure because of our debts. But, Mum, we need to talk to the new owner. We need to ask for more time. We need to explain our situation." I smiled then. A small, sad smile, but filled with power. "You don't need to look far. The new owner is standing in front of you." I held up the keys so they could see them clearly. I saw both of them look at those keys as if they were an apparition. I bought this apartment 3 days ago in the judicial foreclosure sale. I paid $60,000. Money I saved during these 2 years working day and night. Money I scraped together living in a tiny room, eating the minimum, sacrificing every small luxury. The silence that fell upon us was so dense I could feel it pressing against my skin. Robert had gone completely still, as if someone had pressed pause on his life. Elizabeth began to shake her head, slowly at first, then faster. No, no, Mum. No. You came to help us, right? You bought the apartment to save us, so they wouldn't throw us out. Please tell me yes. Tears began to stream down her cheeks, tears that 2 years ago would have shattered me. But now I looked at them with a strange emotional distance. Mum, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I'm sorry for everything that happened. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. I'm sorry I let Robert. May I come in? I asked calmly. This is my apartment after all. I'd like to see how it is. Robert automatically stepped aside, like an automaton. Elizabeth backed away, her hands still over her mouth, her eyes red and swollen. I entered the apartment that had been my home for 15 years. And what I saw shocked me. The place was a mess. The elegant furniture that Robert had bought with so much pride was worn and stained. The huge television he used to show off to his guests had a broken screen in one corner. The walls that were once immaculate now showed damp marks and peeling paint. There were boxes piled everywhere, some half-packed, others simply filled with junk. The apartment smelled stale, of defeat, of broken dreams. I walked slowly through the living room, touching surfaces I had once cleaned with my own hands. I ran my fingers over the shelf where I used to put fresh flowers every week. I looked toward the balcony where Robert had forbidden me to hang my clothes. How did you get to this point? I finally asked, my voice cutting the tense silence. Robert cleared his throat. He tried to recover some of his old arrogance, but his voice came out weak, defensive. The economy is difficult, Mrs. Martha. I was laid off without warning. Then I couldn't find another job at the same level. I had to accept low-paying temporary jobs. The debts piled up. The bank didn't want to negotiate. It wasn't our fault. It wasn't your fault, I repeated softly. None of this was your fault. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The same street where I had sat crying with my suitcases 2 years ago. When you had money, I continued without turning around. Did you remember me? Did you ever think about calling me to apologize? To see how I was? If I had somewhere to sleep? If I had something to eat? No one answered. I turned around to look at them. Elizabeth was crying silently, tears streaming down her cheeks uncontrollably. Robert was looking at the floor, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Robert, a question, I said in a calm voice. Where are all those important friends who came to your elegant dinners? Those clients you rubbed shoulders with? Why is none of them helping you now? Robert clenched his jaw but didn't answer. I'll tell you why. Because those people were never your friends. They were business contacts who disappeared the moment you stopped being useful to them. That's what happens when you build your life on appearances instead of substance. I didn't come here to be lectured by you, Robert said suddenly, finding a glimmer of his old character. If you came to throw us out, do it. But don't pretend this gives you any kind of moral superiority. Moral superiority? I laughed without humor. No, Robert, I don't have moral superiority. I just have something you no longer have. I have the power. I have the keys. I have the documents with my name on them. I took out the folder I was carrying under my arm and placed it on the dirty table. These are the property papers. As you can see, the apartment is registered in the name of Martha Dinais. I am the legal owner of this property. Elizabeth approached the table with trembling steps and opened the folder. She read the documents with glassy eyes. "Mum, please," she whispered, "don't do this to us. We're your family." Family. The word came out of my mouth with more venom than I intended. You threw me out onto the street at my 70 years old, and now you talk to me about family. It was a mistake, Elizabeth sobbed. It was the worst mistake of my life. I have lived with the guilt every day. Every night I think about you crying on that sidewalk. Every time I pass by there, I stop and remember. Mum, please forgive me. For the first time since I entered, I felt something break inside me. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something, a crack in the armor of coldness I had built. Elizabeth, look at me, I said more softly. She looked up, her face ravaged by tears. Where were you that day, when Robert packed my things and put me on the street? Where were you? I was there, she whispered. Exactly. You were there. And you didn't say anything. You didn't do anything. You stayed sitting on that couch while your mother begged for a place to sleep. I was scared, she admitted between sobs. I was scared of Robert. I was scared of losing my marriage. I was scared of being left alone. I was a coward, Mum. I was a terrible daughter. I know. Robert stepped forward, his face reddening. Wait a minute. Now it turns out everything is my fault. Elizabeth agreed with the decision. She also wanted you to leave. That's not true, Elizabeth yelled, turning to him. You pressured me. You said if I wasn't on your side, then I was against you. You forced me to choose. No one forced you to do anything. You were always an adult capable of making your own decisions. I watched them fight as if I weren't there. I watched years of resentment and guilt surface. I watched their marriage disintegrate before my eyes. And I realized something important. They were already destroyed. They had already lost everything. Life had already charged them for their cruelty in ways I could never match. Enough, I said firmly. Both of them fell silent and looked at me. I didn't come here to witness your couple's therapy. I sat down on the stained couch, not caring about the dirt. I needed to sit down for what was coming. You have 30 days to vacate the apartment, just like the bank notification says. That is not going to change. This apartment is mine now, and I'm going to live here. I saw renewed panic in Elizabeth's eyes, but I continued, raising a hand to silence her. I am not going to leave you on the street. Not because you deserve it, but because I am not like you. I took an envelope from my purse. Here are $2,000 in cash. It is enough to pay the deposit and the first month's rent in a modest apartment. Mildred, my friend, knows some available places that are within what you can afford with Elizabeth's current salary. I placed the envelope on the table. Neither of them moved to take it. I also spoke with Marcus, my attorney. He knows someone who might have a job for you, Robert. It's nothing glamorous. It's warehouse work, loading and unloading. It pays $11 an hour. If you are interested, the interview is Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning. I took out a business card and placed it next to the envelope. That's all I'm going to do for you. The rest is completely up to you. Why? Robert asked in a hoarse voice. Why are you helping us after everything? I'm not doing it for you, I answered honestly. I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it because I want to be able to sleep at night. I'm doing it because I don't want to become the type of person you were to me. I got up from the couch and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I turned around one last time. Elizabeth, If someday you want to try to rebuild some kind of relationship with me, you will have to do it as an independent adult, not as a needy daughter looking for rescue. You will have to come to me with something more than apologies and tears. You will have to come with real changes, with actions, not just words. Mum, I... 30 days, I repeated firmly, and after that, I want this apartment completely empty and clean. If you leave any damage, I will sue you for the repair costs. Understood. Both nodded in silence. I left the apartment and closed the door behind me. My legs were shaking so much that I had to lean against the hallway wall for a moment. My heart was racing frantically, my hands were sweating. But I had done it. I had faced them, and I had maintained my dignity in the process. I slowly walked down the stairs. When I left the building, the sun was shining outside. I took a deep breath of the fresh air. Mildred was waiting for me on the corner, as we had agreed. "How do you feel?" she asked me. "Empty," I admitted, but also relieved, as if I had closed a door that had been open for too long. "Did you give them the money?" "Yes." "You are too good, Martha." "I'm not good. I'm just tired of carrying hatred." The next 30 days were strange. I knew Elizabeth and Robert were still in the apartment packing their things, looking for a new place, preparing to leave. But I didn't go back during that time. I didn't want to witness their moving process. I didn't want any more confrontations. Instead, I used those days to plan, to imagine what the apartment would be like once it was truly mine. Marcus helped me find an honest contractor who gave me estimates for the necessary repairs. I needed new paint, to fix the damp on the walls, change some outlets, repair the bathroom floor. It was going to cost another $3,000, but it was worth it. That apartment was going to be my home, my sanctuary, the physical symbol of my rebirth. Sarah came to visit me almost every day during those weeks. She brought decorating magazines, and we spent hours planning how each room would look. "Grandma, you should put your floral arrangement workshop in the second bedroom. It has good natural light." "That's an excellent idea, honey. And you know what else? When the semester ends, you could move in with me, share expenses, help me with the business." My heart filled with warmth at the idea. "You really would want to do that?" "Grandma, I've been living in that horrible student dorm for 2 years. Of course, I want to live with you. Besides, someone has to make sure you eat well and don't work too much." I laughed for the first time in weeks, a genuine laugh, full of joy. "And your parents, what will they say?" Sarah shrugged. "Let them say what they want. I'm an adult now. I can make my own decisions. And my decision is to be with the person who has always loved me unconditionally." Day 29 arrived with a call I didn't expect. It was Elizabeth. "Mum, tomorrow is the last day. We've finished packing. We found a small apartment a few miles from here. Robert got the job at the warehouse. I wanted to ask if you could come tomorrow to inspect the apartment, to make sure everything is how you want it." Her voice sounded tired, defeated, but there was also something different about it, something more mature. "I'll be there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon," I replied. "Thank you, Mum." "Yes?" "And there's something else I need to tell you. Something important." "What is it?" "I prefer to say it in person, if you don't mind." We hung up, and I spent the rest of the day restless. What did she want to tell me? Had she changed her mind about leaving? Would she try to beg me once more? The next day, I arrived at the apartment at exactly 3 o'clock. I rang the doorbell, and this time it was Elizabeth who opened the door. She looked different again, thinner, with deep, dark circles, but also with something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. She seemed more present, more conscious. "Come in, Mum." The apartment was empty, completely empty. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. The floor had been swept and mopped. It smelled of floor cleaner. "We did our best to leave it clean," Elizabeth said in a low voice. "I know there are some stains on the walls that we couldn't remove. If you want to deduct it from the $2,000 you gave us, I'll understand." I walked through the empty rooms. I checked the bathroom, the kitchen, the bedrooms. They had done a decent job. It wasn't perfect, but it was clear they had made a real effort. "It's all right," I finally said. "It's acceptable." Elizabeth let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you." We stood there in the empty living room, the silence heavy between us. "What did you want to tell me?" I finally asked. Elizabeth took a deep breath and sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. After a moment, I did the same, sitting across from her. "Mum, these 30 days have been the hardest of my life, but they have also been the most revealing. Robert and I have talked a lot. We've fought a lot too. And finally, we've been honest with each other for the first time in years." She wiped away a tear that was starting to form. "We're separating. Officially. Not immediately, because neither of us can afford to live alone right now. But emotionally, our marriage is over. I think it ended a long time ago, but neither of us wanted to admit it." I didn't know what to say, so I just waited for her to continue. "All my adult life, I've been Robert's wife. I've let him make the decisions. I've sacrificed my own opinions, my own desires, to keep the peace, including sacrificing you." Her voice broke. "Mum, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect us to ever be what we were. I know I destroyed that. But I need you to know that I finally understood. I understood that I was a coward. I understood that I chose a mediocre marriage over my own mother. And I understood that I deserve to live with that guilt for the rest of my life." "Elizabeth." "No, please, let me finish. I need to say this." I nodded. "I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to therapy. I already made the first appointment. I'm going to learn to be strong, to have my own voice, to not need a man's approval to feel valuable. And someday, when I'm a better person, if you wanted to give me a chance, I'd like to try to get to know you again. Not as your dependent daughter, but as an adult woman who respects and admires another adult woman." Tears ran freely down her face now. "And I want you to know that seeing you arrive here as the owner of the apartment, seeing you so strong and so dignified after everything we put you through, was the most powerful lesson I have received in my life. You showed me what it means to be truly strong. It's not about yelling or dominating. It's about getting up when you are knocked down. It's about rebuilding yourself with your own hands. It's about maintaining your humanity, even when others treat you without humanity." I felt my own tears beginning to form. "You showed me what real dignity looks like, Mum. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be even half as strong as you." I got up from the floor and walked to the window. I needed a moment to process all of this. "Elizabeth, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that everything is all right. It's not all right. You hurt me in a way that is going to take a long time to heal. Maybe it will never heal completely, I know. But I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate that you are not trying to minimize what you did or look for excuses, and I appreciate that you are taking real responsibility." I turned around to look at her. "So I'll tell you this. The door is not open, but it's not locked either. If you really do the work, if you really change, if you really become the woman you say you want to be, then maybe, someday, we can have some kind of relationship. But it will be on my terms, and only when I am ready." Elizabeth nodded, more tears falling. It's more than I deserve. Thank you, Mum. She got up and took something out of her pocket. It was an envelope. These are the apartment keys, and all the copies. And here is a paper with the Wi-Fi passwords and the numbers for the utility accounts, in case you need them to make the changes. I took the envelope. There's something else in there, too. It's a letter I wrote. You don't have to read it now if you don't want to, but someday, if you can, I would like you to read it. All right. We stood there for a moment longer. Where is Robert? I asked. He went to drop off the last boxes at the new apartment. I asked him to let me talk to you alone. He wanted to apologize too, but I told him it wasn't the time, that he needed to work on himself first. I nodded with approval. That was a wise decision. Elizabeth walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned around one last time. I love you, Mum. I have always loved you, even when I didn't know how to show it, even when I failed you in the worst possible way. I know, I replied softly, and I love you too, Elizabeth. That's why it hurts so much. She nodded, wiped her tears one last time, and left. I was left alone in the empty apartment, completely alone for the first time in that space that had been so many different things to me. First a home, then a prison, then the scene of my greatest humiliation, and now, finally, my quiet victory. I walked through each room slowly. I touched the walls. I looked out the windows. I stood in the exact spot where that couch had been sitting, where Elizabeth remained silent while they kicked me out. And then I cried. I cried for everything I had lost. I cried for the years of abuse I would never get back. I cried for the mother-daughter relationship that had broken and that might never be fully repaired. But I also cried with relief. I cried because I had survived. I cried because I had rebuilt myself. I cried because I had proven, first to myself and then to the world, that I was stronger than anyone had imagined. When I finally stopped crying, I took out my phone and called Mildred. It's official. The apartment is mine and it's empty. Can you come celebrate with me? I'll be there in 20 minutes with a bottle of wine and some food. Mildred arrived exactly 20 minutes later with Sarah, Marcus, and Patricia. Together, they had brought food, drinks, music on a small portable speaker, even a blanket for us to sit on the floor. We had an impromptu picnic in my empty living room. A toast, Marcus said, raising his plastic cup. To Martha, the bravest woman I know. To Grandma, Sarah added with shining eyes, for teaching me that it's never too late to start over. To my friend, Mildred said, for proving that kindness and strength can exist in the same person. To my best client turned my inspiration, Patricia toasted. We all drank and laughed, we shared stories, we made plans for the apartment renovation. Sarah showed me photos of curtains she had seen on the internet. Marcus offered to help me with any legal problems that might arise. Patricia said she would get me more corporate contracts. That night, after everyone left, I stayed alone in the apartment. I lay down on the blanket in the middle of the empty living room and looked at the ceiling. 72 years. I had lived 72 years, and these last 2 had been the most difficult and also the most transformative. I had learned that family is not always the one you were born into. Sometimes it is the one you choose to build. Mildred, Marcus, Patricia, and especially Sarah. They would be my real family now. I had learned that it is never too late to start over. That 70 years doesn't mean your life is over. It means you have 70 years of experience to use in your next chapter. I had learned that revenge doesn't need to be cruel to be effective. Sometimes the best revenge is simply to survive, to flourish, to prove that they didn't destroy you. 3 months later, the apartment was completely renovated. The walls painted a soft cream color. New floors, simple but comfortable furniture. The second bedroom converted into my floral arrangement workshop with a large table, shelves for materials, and natural light streaming in through the window. Sarah had moved in with me as promised. We shared expenses and responsibilities. We cooked together. We laughed together. At night, we sat on the balcony where before I wasn't allowed to hang my clothes, sipping tea and talking about everything and nothing. My business continued to grow. I had hired a younger woman to help me with the big jobs. I was training her, passing on my knowledge. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after getting the apartment back, someone rang the doorbell. Sarah went to open it. "Grandma, it's Mum." My heart sped up. I hadn't seen Elizabeth since the day she handed me the keys. "Do you want me to tell her to leave?" Sarah asked. "No, let her in." Elizabeth entered timidly. She looked different again, thinner but also healthier. She had short hair, a style she had never worn before. She was wearing simple but clean clothes. "Hello, Mum." "Hello, Sarah." "Hello, Mum," Sarah replied cautiously. "Would you like to sit down?" I offered, pointing to the couch. "Thank you." The three of us sat down. The silence was awkward, but not hostile. "I've been going to therapy," Elizabeth began, "twice a week for these 6 months. I also joined a support group for women who are leaving codependent relationships." "I'm glad to hear that," I said honestly. "Robert and I officially got divorced last month. It was amicable. We both understood that it was for the best. He's still working at the warehouse. I got a better job as an administrator at a dental clinic. It doesn't pay much yet, but it has benefits and room to grow." I nodded, listening. "I'm living in a shared apartment with 2 other women. It's small, but it's mine. I pay my own bills. I make my own decisions. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm getting to know myself. Who am I without a man defining me?" She took an envelope from her purse. "These are $500. I know it's not much compared to everything I owe you, but it's the first payment. I want to pay you back the $2,000 you gave us. Not because you have to ask for it, but because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to pay you $500 every 2 months until the debt is complete." I took the envelope, but didn't open it. "Elizabeth, I don't need you to pay me back that money." "I know, but I need to pay it back. For my own peace of mind. For my own sense of responsibility." I really looked at her for the first time in months. I saw the effort in her eyes. I saw the fatigue of someone who is working hard on herself. I saw my daughter finally becoming the woman I had always hoped she would be. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" I asked softly. Her eyes filled with tears. "Really, Sarah is making lasagna. She always makes too much food anyway." Sarah smiled. "It's true, and it's smelling delicious." The three of us ate dinner together that night. The conversation was careful at first, full of pauses and awkward moments. But little by little, it became more natural. We talked about Elizabeth's job, about Sarah's studies, about my latest decorating contracts. We didn't talk about the past. Not yet. That would come with time. When Elizabeth left that night, she hugged me at the door. "Thank you, Mum, for giving me a chance." "It's just dinner, Elizabeth. It's not a full pardon. It's not a clean slate." "I know, but it's a beginning, and that's more than I deserve." After she left, Sarah and I cleaned the kitchen together. "Are you all right, Grandma?" "Yes, honey, I'm all right." "Do you think you'll ever be able to go back to how things were?" "No," I replied honestly. "We will never go back to how things were. But maybe we can be something different, something new, something built on more honest foundations." That night, Lying in my bed in my apartment, in my home that I had recovered with my own effort, I thought about the entire journey. I had started as a broken woman, sitting on a sidewalk with 3 suitcases and a shattered heart. I had rebuilt myself into an independent businesswoman with her own workshop, her own income, her own dignity. I had recovered not only an apartment, but my sense of self-worth, my strength, my voice. And now perhaps I was starting to recover my daughter as well. Not the daughter I lost. That one would never come back. But a new version, an adult, responsible, conscious version. Would it be enough? Would the damage that had been done ever fully heal? Probably not. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, as I had learned in these 2 years, are powerful. They are proof that no matter how low you fall, you can always get up. You can always start over. You can always rebuild. I closed my eyes and fell asleep in peace, knowing that I had done the right thing. Not the easiest thing, not the most vengeful thing, but the right thing. And that, finally, was enough.